You felt it before you had words for it. Before you knew what loneliness was, before you knew how people hide behind smiles, before you learned that most of the world survives by pretending not to see. It was there in childhood, quiet and steady, like a second moon hanging over your life that no one else seemed to notice. You could be in a room full of voices and still feel as though you were standing just outside it, your hand resting on an invisible door, watching everyone move through a world that did not fully open for you. Other people called it shyness, sensitivity, overthinking, a phase. But deep down, you knew it was none of those things. It was older than that, stranger than that. There were moments when the world around you felt too thin, as if the surface of things could not hold your attention because something beneath it kept calling your name. Even as a child, you could sense when words did not match the energy behind them. You could feel when a room turned cold behind polite laughter. You noticed the pause before someone lied. You noticed the sadness people tried to bury inside ordinary conversation. You noticed the silence after certain sentences, the kind of silence that says more than speech ever could. And because you noticed, you began to separate. Not always outwardly. Sometimes you smiled. Sometimes you played along. Sometimes you tried with all your strength to be simple, easy, normal. But there was always a part of you standing back, watching, measuring, listening for what was real. It made the world heavier than it seemed for others. The games people played did not feel harmless to you. The masks did not feel natural. The little betrayals, the shallow talk, the hunger to be accepted at any cost, all of it brushed against your spirit like sand against bare skin. You could endure it, but you could not belong to it. That is where the wound began. Not because you were broken, but because something in you refused to fall asleep. Ancient people would have understood this better than the modern world does. They knew there were souls who arrived carrying a memory they could not explain. In the old temples, under ceilings painted like the night sky, the priests spoke of those who were born with one foot still resting in the unseen. They were often quiet children, observant children, children who seemed older than their own faces. They were not always happy. In fact, they often carried a sorrow they could not name. Because to feel deeply in a world that rewards numbness is to carry an invisible burden from the beginning. This is why your solitude has always felt different from ordinary loneliness. It was never just the pain of being left out. It was the ache of being unable to give your heart to what felt false. That ache shaped you. It followed you through school, through friendships, through rooms where everyone laughed at things that did not seem funny, through moments when you wondered if you were the problem simply because you could not relax inside the performance. You tried to tell yourself that maybe you were too intense, too serious, too inward. But the truth was more unsettling. You were seeing cracks in the structure that others were trained not to see. There's an old image of Thoth that was never meant to be understood in a shallow way. He stands with the head of the ibis, moon-minded, patient, holding the reed and the tablet, recording what is true. Not what is convenient, not what is popular, what is true. He is the keeper of sacred language, the witness who does not look away. In old carvings, he is not loud. He does not conquer through force. He measures, he remembers, he names. And there is something in that presence that touches your life more deeply than you may realize, because your pain has never come from being empty. It has come from noticing too much and being unable to betray what you noticed. That is why being alone sometimes made you feel stronger than being around people. Not always happier, not always safer, but clearer. Around the wrong people, your energy bent itself into unnatural shapes. You edited your instincts. You swallowed your own perception. You felt your inner voice grow, faint beneath noise, pressure, and the demand to be agreeable. But when you were alone, something returned. Your breathing changed. Your thoughts became honest again. The strange tension in your body loosened. The mask slipped off. You did not have to explain what you sensed. You did not have to force laughter into your mouth. You did not have to dim your awareness to keep others comfortable. Aloneness did not create your power. It revealed it. This is the part most people misunderstand. They think your distance means you're wounded by life in a way that made you weak. They assume your reserve is fear. They assume your silence is emptiness. They do not understand that for some souls, silence is not absence. It is a chamber, a temple chamber, a moonlit room of stone where truth can finally be heard without interruption. You have spent time there, even if you did not know its name. In your quietest nights, when the world felt far away and your thoughts moved like slow water, you may have felt it, the sense that something ancient in you becomes more visible when the noise is gone. That feeling is not imaginary. It is the beginning of recognition. You were never meant to fit smoothly into a world built on distraction. You were never shaped for easy sleep inside shallow systems. That is why so much of your life has felt like standing in a crowd while hearing a different music, a deeper rhythm, one that others either cannot hear or do not want to hear because it would require too much honesty. It is exhausting to live that way. It can make you question yourself. It can make you wonder whether peace would have been easier if you had been born less aware, less sensitive to words, to moods, to hidden motives, to spiritual weight. But the same sensitivity that has made life painful is also the mark of a different design. Some souls are built for comfort. Some are built for truth. Truth has always cost you more. That is why the silence found you so early. That is why ordinary belonging always seemed to come with a price your spirit could not pay. That is why being alone often felt less like abandonment and more like returning to a place inside yourself that had not been contaminated. Somewhere in you, long before you understood any of this, a gate had already opened, not to the easy world, but to the real one. And once that gate opens, even a little, you cannot fully go back to sleep. You can pretend, you can perform, you can stand among the crowd and repeat the right words. But deep inside, you will still feel it. The watcher, the witness, the quiet intelligence that keeps turning your face toward what is hidden. And that is only the beginning of why your solitude has never been ordinary. And because you could not go back to sleep, the world began to show itself in a way that made your life both clearer and harder. You started to notice that most people were not really speaking to each other. They were speaking from roles, from defenses, from wounds they had turned into personalities. You could hear it in the way someone offered kindness while hiding resentment beneath it. You could feel it in the way a room changed when a certain person walked in, even if no one said a word. You could see it in the strange distance between what people claim to value and what they actually serve with their time, their fear, their loyalty, their silence. This kind of seeing does not make life simple. It makes life heavy. There's a loneliness that comes from being rejected, and then there's a loneliness that comes from realizing how much of human life is built on things that are not real. That second loneliness reaches deeper. It is not only the pain of being outside. It is the pain of knowing why you are outside. You are not standing apart because you lacked worth. You were standing apart because too much in the world asked you to betray your own perception. Again and again, you were placed in situations where belonging required blindness, and something in you refused. That refusal cost you. It cost you ease. It cost you certain friendships. It cost you the comfort of moving thoughtlessly with the crowd. It may have even cost you your own image of yourself for a while, because when enough people misunderstand you, a dangerous question begins to form in the mind. Maybe they are right. Maybe your standards are too high. Maybe your sensitivity is the problem. Maybe your discomfort is just weakness dressed as depth. But weakness does not sharpen perception. Weakness does not make you feel the fracture in a sentence, the false note in praise, the hidden hunger beneath charm. What you carry is not weakness. It is a nervous system, a spirit, a mind tuned to subtleties that many people spend their whole lives learning to ignore. And that is why ordinary environments can exhaust you so quickly. You're not only hearing words, you are reading currents. You're not only looking at faces, you are sensing what stands behind them. You are not only surviving events, you are absorbing meanings. That is why silence has always mattered to you. Silence gives you back your own signal. In the presence of noise, especially the noise of falsehood, your inner world has to work harder just to remain clear. The modern world rarely understands this. It praises constant contact, constant stimulation, constant reaction. It teaches people to measure their value by visibility, by speed, by how easily they can join the rhythm of the collective. But your soul was not made for that rhythm. You have always needed spaces where language slows down enough for truth to rise. You have always needed distance from the theater of things, so you could remember what you actually felt. This is part of the hidden burden of awareness. People often imagine awareness as light, as insight, as awakening, as if it arrives crowned in gold and brings instant peace. Sometimes it does bring light, but first it often brings grief. Because once you begin to see clearly, you also begin to lose the simple protections that illusion once offered. You can no longer fully believe in what comforts others. You can no longer pretend that every smile is safe, that every structure is just, that every bond is sacred simply because it is familiar. You begin to notice how many people build their lives on avoidance. How many relationships are negotiations of fear. How much social order depends on mutual performance. And when you see that too early, childhood itself can feel strangely unfinished. You may remember moments that seemed small from the outside, but stayed with you for years. A teacher whose voice changed when no one else was paying attention. A family gathering where laughter floated over pain that everyone silently agreed not to name. A friendship that suddenly revealed itself to be built on convenience rather than recognition. These moments may have looked ordinary to others, yet something inside you marked them with unusual intensity. Not because you were dramatic, but because your inner witness was already alive. Some part of you was taking notes long before you understood the script. This is where Thoth begins to emerge, not as a distant myth placed on a shelf, but as a living symbol of what has been unfolding inside you all along. He is the one who records, the one who sees what others rush past, the one who understands that language is not innocent, that words can create order or distortion, that speech can bind the soul to truth or drag it deeper into confusion. In the old imagination, his hand does not shake. His gaze does not flatter. He writes what is. And perhaps that is why your spirit has felt such pain around carelessness, around manipulation, around the misuse of words. Perhaps it is why empty talk leaves you cold. Something in you has always known that language is sacred, that what is spoken shapes reality, that lies do not simply disappear after they are said. They leave residue. They alter the atmosphere. They ask the soul to live in a room where the air has been changed. You have felt that residue. You have walked away from certain people feeling tired without knowing why, only later realizing that your body had been translating what your mind had not yet named. You have probably tried to ignore those signals before. Try to stay. Try to be fair. Try to make peace with what your deeper instinct was warning you about. Sometimes you stayed too long because you wanted to believe the best. Sometimes you left early and wondered if you were being harsh. But over time, the pattern became impossible to dismiss. Your body knew. Your silence knew. Your solitude knew. This is one reason you feel stronger alone. Alone, the static clears. The borrowed emotions begin to fall away. The pressure to make excuses for what feels wrong begins to weaken. You stop negotiating against your own knowing. And when that happens, you're no longer a stranger to yourself. You return to your own center. And in that return, there is strength, even if it comes mixed with sadness. Because yes, there is sadness in this path. There is sadness in being the one who cannot unsee. There is sadness in outgrowing places that once felt like home. There is sadness in realizing that some people do not want truth. They only want comfort arranged in a convincing shape. There is sadness in learning how often the honest soul must choose between connection and self-betrayal. This is why you have sometimes felt tired in ways sleep could not fix. You are not only carrying your own life, you were carrying the weight of what you perceived but could not always speak. And still, that burden was shaping you. It was teaching you the difference between loneliness and alignment. It was teaching you that being surrounded is not the same as being understood. It was teaching you that the false self grows strong in noise, while the true self returns in stillness. Every disappointment, Every strange feeling of being out of place, every moment of pulling back from what others called normal was carving out an inner chamber where something more real could begin to stand. Remember that feeling from childhood, the one that made you seem quiet even when your mind was full of storms. It was not emptiness. It was depth without language. It was the early form of a wisdom that had not yet found its symbols. And symbols matter, because some truths can only be approached through image, through dream, through the old sacred forms that speak to the deeper mind. An ibis standing in moonlight. A temple wall covered in signs no careless eye could read. A reed pen touching the surface of an unseen record. A scale waiting in stillness. A hidden door inside the self. You have been walking toward that door longer than you know. And the more the world failed to hold what was true for you, the more that door began to matter. And so the door kept forming in silence, not outside you, but within you. Each time you tried to live against your own nature, you felt the strain. Each time you ignored the quiet warning in your chest, something inside you dimmed. Each time you stayed too long in places that demanded performance, your spirit paid for it. This is why your solitude was never just a habit. It became a refuge, then a necessity, and finally something stranger than either of those. It became a passage. There are seasons in life when separation feels like punishment. You watch other people gather with ease. You see them move in groups, speak the language of belonging, trade lightness with one another, and something in you aches. Not because you envy shallowness, but because part of you still longs for rest. Part of you still wonders what it would feel like to stop reading every room, stop weighing every word, stop sensing the distance between appearance and truth. Part of you has wanted a simpler life, a softer mind, an easier heart, but that was never the road beneath your feet. Your road led inward, not because you failed the world, but because the world kept failing what was deepest in you. There is a difference, and it changes everything. When you do not understand that difference, isolation feels like proof that something is wrong with you. You begin to shrink around your own nature. You begin to apologize for needing depth, for needing honesty, for needing silence, for needing more than surface affection and convenient words. But once you begin to see clearly, another meaning emerges. The distance was not always rejection. Often it was protection, a sacred refusal, a hidden sorting. What leaves your life is not always a loss. Sometimes it is a clearing. Ancient initiations understood this. Before wisdom was given a voice, the soul was led into spaces where its old identity could not survive. Not bright halls filled with applause, but quiet chambers, desert edges, stone rooms where the night pressed close and no outer distraction could save you from yourself. There, the masks had no function. There, borrowed identities fell away. There, a person discovered whether they had been living from the center of their being or merely from the fear of exclusion. This is why isolation has felt so severe at times. It was not designed to flatter you. It was designed to strip you. The false self does not die gently. It resists. It bargains. It tries to return to familiar roles, familiar people, familiar patterns, even when those things have already poisoned the soul. The false self would rather be accepted in a lie than left alone in truth. That is why so many people never pass through the deeper gate. They sense it, but they turn back. The silence becomes too revealing. The emptiness begins to expose how much of their life was built around being seen, approved of, chosen by others. You are forced deeper than that. Maybe not by choice at first. Maybe life pushed you there through loss, betrayal, confusion, disappointment, exhaustion, or the slow realization that pretending was becoming more painful than being alone. However it happened, the old identity began to crack. The version of you that tried to be digestible, harmless, easy to place, easy to define, easy to keep around without being truly known, that version could not keep living forever. It was too expensive. It demanded too much silence from your real voice. So the separation deepened. And in that deepening, you met something most people spend their lives avoiding. You met yourself without witnesses. That meeting is not romantic. It does not always feel holy when you are inside it. Sometimes it feels like wandering through an inner desert with no sign of water. Sometimes it feels like every certainty has been taken from you. Sometimes it feels like standing in a moonlit chamber with walls of stone, hearing only your own thoughts echo back, stripped of distraction, stripped of excuses, stripped of the old stories that once helped you endure. But this is where something sacred begins. Not in comfort, in honesty. Because once there's no one left to impress, no role left to maintain, no crowd left to adapt yourself to, a more ancient question rises from the floor of the soul. What remains when the performance ends? That question has followed you for longer than you know. It followed you in childhood, when you stood at the edge of things feeling older than your years. It followed you in every room where you smiled but did not belong. It followed you in every bond that felt incomplete because something essential in you remained untouched. And when isolation came, not as a moment, but as a pattern, that question grew louder. What remains? What remains is not the mask, not the version of you built to survive shallow systems, not the personality arranged to avoid friction, not the self that learned to soften its instincts to keep the peace. What remains is harder, quieter, and more real. A deeper authority, a presence that does not need constant agreement to exist, a center that does not dissolve just because it stands alone. This is the hidden reason solitude has strengthened you. It removed the mirrors that lied. Around the wrong people, you are often shown a distorted image of yourself. Too much, too sensitive, too intense, too distant, too difficult to understand, too unwilling to play along. But in real solitude, those judgments begin to lose their grip. Without the noise of projection, you can finally hear what your own nature has been saying all along. You were never too much for truth. You were too much for distortion. You were never too sensitive for what is real. You were sensitive enough to notice what was false. You were never difficult because you lacked value. You were difficult to place because your soul would not fit inside artificial shapes. That realization changes the inner atmosphere. The loneliness does not vanish at once, but it begins to transform. It stops feeling only like absence and starts to feel like space. Space to hear, space to recover, space to gather back the parts of yourself that were scattered by performance, space to let grief speak without interruption, space to see how much of your exhaustion came from constantly standing in fields that were not yours. In that space, even pain becomes useful. Even sorrow becomes instructive. Even longing begins to reveal what you are actually made for. This is why some of your deepest turning points may have come in private. Not on stages, not in crowds, not through external recognition, but in quiet moments when something settled inside you with strange finality. A night when you realized you could not go back. A morning when you looked at someone or something that once had power over you and felt the cord beginning to break. An hour of silence when you sensed, without fully understanding it, that the loneliness itself had been shaping your sight. It was shaping your sight because separation, when endured consciously, becomes discernment. You begin to notice what nourishes and what drains, what is alive and what is rehearsed, what carries soul and what only imitates it. The more you stop abandoning yourself, the more exact your inner compass becomes. And that compass is not merely psychological. It feels older than your biography, older than your disappointments, older than your present life story, as if somewhere beneath the personality, beneath the wounds, beneath the learned defenses, there is a memory that never fully disappeared. A memory of order, a memory of truth, a memory of standing before something greater than the human theater and recognizing it immediately. That is why the desert was necessary. Not to destroy you, but to separate your real voice from every borrowed one. And once that voice begins to return, even faintly, the silence around you no longer feels empty. It feels as though something is waiting there, patient as moonlight on stone, ready to show you why you had to walk apart for so long. Ready to show you why you had to walk apart for so long, and why the separation was never random. There is a law beneath human confusion, not the law of governments, customs, trends, or social approval, but a deeper order that does not bend simply because a crowd agrees to ignore it. The old Egyptians spoke about this order through symbols, because symbols can carry truths the ordinary mind resists. They spoke of balance, measure, rightness, the invisible harmony that keeps the stars in their courses and the soul accountable to itself. And near that mystery stands Thoth, still and watchful, not as a decoration from a dead religion, but as a living image of what happens when truth enters a life that can no longer survive on illusion. You have felt that entrance. It did not arrive with thunder. It arrived through dissonance, through the moment you smiled while something in you said no, through the conversation that looked harmless from the outside but left your spirit uneasy for hours, through the relationship that offered closeness while asking you to betray your deeper knowing, through the social ritual, the family role, the false peace, the polished ambition, the flattering lie. Again and again, your life placed you in front of hidden scales, and whether you understood it or not, something in you kept weighing what was being asked of your soul. This is why you could never fully relax inside falsehood. Other people could call it normal. They could say you think too much, feel too much, read too much into things. But that was never the whole story. The deeper story is that you were measuring, not in the cold way of judgment, but in the sacred way of alignment. You were sensing whether a thing had inner weight, whether a word carried reality or only performance, whether a bond honored the soul or merely fed the fear of being alone, whether a path belonged to you or was simply available, whether your silence was asking you to stay still or to leave. Thoth belongs to that moment of measure. He is the scribe, yes, but not merely a writer of facts. He is the intelligence that records the moral shape of things. He is the witness to what is spoken and what is concealed. In the old temple imagination, nothing vanished simply because it was hidden from public view. Every action entered a larger order. Every distortion changed the balance. Every truth restored something that lies had displaced. This is why Thoth feels so strangely close to the life of anyone who has suffered from seeing too much. He represents the part of reality that confirms you were not imagining it. The mask was a mask. The lie was a lie. The energy you felt beneath the words was real. The hidden fracture was there. That recognition is powerful, but can also be painful. Because once you realize your inner witness was right so many times, you must also grieve the years you spent doubting yourself. You must face how often you explained away your own perception just to preserve connection. How often you chose patience when your deeper mind already knew. How often you try to make peace with misalignment because you feared the cost of naming it. This is one of the heaviest burdens carried by sensitive souls. Not only the pain of being misunderstood, but the pain of having misunderstood themselves in order to remain near others. Still, even that pain has meaning. Thoth does not only record error, he also restores language to its proper place. And language matters more than most people know. The moment you name a thing clearly, its spell begins to break. A false bond loses part of its power when you stop calling it love. A pattern of manipulation weakens when you stop calling it care. A life built on pleasing others starts to crack when you stop calling it kindness. Sacred language is not ornamental. It is liberating. It draws a sharp line between what is true and what you were trained to tolerate. This is why your healing has never been about becoming less sensitive. It has been about becoming more exact about what drains you, more exact about what your spirit rejects, more exact about the difference between loneliness and self-betrayal, more exact about the cost of living against your own inner law. This is the weighing of truth, not a punishment waiting for you after death, but a process already happening in your life. Every time you ignore your deeper knowing, you feel heavier. Every time you speak falsely to protect an illusion, you feel divided. Every time you remain loyal to what your soul has already outgrown, your energy becomes dull, clouded, constrained. And every time you honor what is real, even when it costs you comfort, something becomes lighter, clearer, straighter within you. It is almost physical, as if your spine remembers itself, as if the room inside your chest regains air, as if some forgotten law has been obeyed, and in obeying it, you return to yourself. This is why being alone can feel stronger than being surrounded, because strength is not always the feeling of power. Sometimes it is the absence of distortion. Sometimes it is the body no longer bracing against energies it does not trust. Sometimes it is the mind no longer splitting itself in two to protect a connection that asks too much. Sometimes it is the soul standing before its own reflection without needing applause, permission, or agreement. In that state, solitude stops being emptiness. It becomes clean space. Space where your inner scales can settle. Space where your own truth can stop competing with noise. Remember the hidden door that kept appearing in silence. Remember the moonlit chamber. Remember the desert that stripped away borrowed voices. All of that was preparing you for this realization. Your life has been an education in inner authority. Not arrogance, not coldness. Authority. The authority to know what you know. The authority to leave what violates your spirit. The authority to stop asking lesser minds to approve what your deeper nature has already confirmed. That authority is not invented. It is awakened, and the awakening is not loud. It often happens in the quietest moments. A sentence you can no longer say. A room you can no longer endure. A role you can no longer perform. A person you can no longer explain away. The old self trembles there because it senses a threshold. On one side is the familiar pain of self-abandonment. On the other is the sacred uncertainty of truth. This is where many turn back. This is where they choose comfort over alignment, company over clarity, noise over inner law. But something in you has always been moving toward the deeper side of the threshold. That is why your loneliness was not meaningless. It was training. It was teaching you to hear yourself without interference, to trust what arrives before evidence becomes public, to recognize that truth often enters the body before it enters the mind, to understand that your difference is tied not only to sensitivity, but to remembrance. Some part of you remembers that life cannot be built safely on distortion. Some part of you remembers that words shape destiny. Some part of you remembers that the soul weakens when it keeps bowing to what it knows is false. This is where Thoth stands beside you most clearly, not as a figure demanding worship, but as a presence of incorruptible witness. The ibis in the half-light, the reed touching the tablet, the patient intelligence that neither rushes nor flatters. The one who knows that every soul is eventually brought before what is real. And perhaps that is why you have suffered so much around pretense. You are not made to live far from reality for long. You can visit those rooms. You can survive them. But you cannot build your home there. Something greater in you refuses. And once that refusal becomes conscious, the path ahead changes. Because the soul that stops betraying its own scales cannot return to ordinary sleep. It begins to walk differently, speak differently, choose differently. It begins to sense that all the years of exile were gathering toward a revelation more intimate than comfort and more demanding than belonging. A revelation about who you become when the witness inside you is no longer denied. A revelation about who you become when the witness inside you is no longer denied. You stop trying to make your soul acceptable to people who only know how to love masks. That is one of the first changes. Quiet, almost invisible from the outside, but immense within. You stop bending every truth into a softer shape so others can stay comfortable. You stop calling your exhaustion a misunderstanding. You stop treating your inner warning like an inconvenience. And with each small refusal, something ancient in you stands taller. This is why you feel stronger alone. Not because you were made to hate the world. Not because you are above human love. Not because isolation is the final destination. You feel stronger alone because for a long time, aloneness was the only place where your spirit could remain undivided. It was the only place where your inner scales could rest. The only place where the false self lost its voice. The only place where you could hear the deeper current moving beneath all the noise. And once you hear that current clearly, you begin to understand that your life was never asking you to become less different. It was asking you to become more precise, more loyal to what is real, more faithful to the strange intelligence that has guided you through rooms where nothing felt clean, through seasons where everyone around you seemed satisfied with appearances, while something in you kept searching for the hidden structure beneath them. That search was not a flaw in your personality. It was the movement of your soul toward its own design. There are people who are built to live inside the surface of things. They move well there. They can survive by adapting quickly, speaking lightly, exchanging versions of themselves as circumstances change. But your soul does not move that way. It remembers too much. It listens too deeply. It feels the moral weight inside words, the unseen consequence inside choices, the quiet fracture inside whatever is built on pretense. That is why ordinary life has so often felt like friction against your spirit. You were trying to breathe in places where the air had already been thinned by compromise. And still, you survived those places. More than that, you learned from them. You learned what happens when you silence yourself for the sake of belonging. You learned what it costs to stay where your deeper nature cannot breathe. You learned that some forms of connection are only refined forms of disappearance. You learned that being chosen by the wrong people can be more dangerous than being left alone. You learned that the pain of isolation, though sharp, is often cleaner than the pain of self-betrayal. That knowledge is costly, but it is sacred, because once it settles in you, a different kind of life becomes possible. Not a perfect life, not a life without grief, but a life with inner coherence. A life where your words begin to match what you know. A life where your body no longer has to carry the burden of constant contradiction. A life where your sensitivity becomes guidance instead of shame. A life where your loneliness is no longer interpreted as evidence that you are defective, but as proof that your soul has been refusing counterfeit belonging. This is where the deeper meaning of Thoth becomes clear. He was never only the keeper of hidden texts. He is the image of consciousness that cannot be bribed away from truth. The witness who remembers the original pattern. The intelligence that holds language, measure, memory, and order together. In that sense, he lives wherever a soul refuses distortion. He lives wherever someone dares to name what is real after years of silence. He lives wherever an inwardly exiled person finally understands that their exile was not meaningless, but initiatory, a preparation, a refinement, a long passage through shadow, so the inner law could become stronger than the hunger to fit in. That is what happened to you. You were not being emptied by separation. You were being clarified by it. Every disappointment stripped something away. Every false bond exposed another lesson. Every season of standing outside the ordinary world forced you to meet a deeper layer of yourself. And beneath all the pain, something was being preserved. Something cannot be bought by praise or soothed by shallow approval. Something remained awake. That awake part of you is the reason you could never completely merge with a life that felt false. It is the reason your conscience has such a sharp edge. The reason your body recoils from certain energies before your mind can explain them. The reason silence has often felt more nourishing than conversation. The reason you can sense the soul of a thing even when its outer form is convincing. This is not an accident of temperament. It is a spiritual architecture. Some souls are built like open marketplaces, full of movement, exchange, and easy access. Others are built like inner sanctuaries, stone chambers behind hidden doors, places not everyone can enter, places where speech must become honest before it is allowed to remain, places where the moon is brighter than the crowd, places where a single true word matters more than 100 charming ones. Your life has shown you, again and again, that you are not built for constant public traffic. You are built like a sanctuary. And sanctuaries are often lonely places until they are understood. This is why your path has required so much self-recognition. No crowd could give this to you. No outer approval could do the work. You had to see yourself clearly enough to stop treating your nature like a problem to solve. You had to understand that your difference is not the wound, though it has been wounded. Your difference is the form through which your soul remains loyal to what it came here to protect. Truth, depth, inner law, sacred speech, discernment, the refusal to bow before what is empty. Once that becomes clear, even your past begins to change shape. The childhood distance was not just sadness. It was early perception. The awkwardness in shallow spaces was not failure. It was misalignment. The repeated endings were not always punishments. They were redirections. The loneliness was not proof that you were forgotten. It was the chamber where your real sight was being trained. There is relief in this realization, but there is also responsibility. Because when you finally know that your solitude has meaning, you can no longer use confusion as a shelter. You cannot keep handing your authority to people who have not earned the right to shape your self-understanding. You cannot keep pretending that what drains you is harmless. You cannot keep calling your inner fracture peace. The witness inside you has become too clear for that. The scales have become too sensitive. The hidden door has opened too far. So the path ahead is not about becoming hard. It is about becoming true. True enough to remain gentle without becoming available to distortion. True enough to love without worshiping illusion. True enough to speak clearly when silence would become self-erasure. True enough to walk away when the soul begins to dim. True enough to stand alone when standing alone is the price of staying whole. That is the strength you feel in solitude. The strength of inner agreement. The strength of no longer being split between what you know and what you perform. The strength of returning again and again to the sacred center that was waiting beneath all your efforts to be understood by the wrong world. And there is something else, something even quieter. As you grow more loyal to that center, the loneliness begins to change. It does not vanish all at once, but it loses some of its bitterness. It becomes less like exile and more like consecration. Less like being abandoned in the desert and more like being taught how to hear. Less like standing outside life and more like standing at its hidden threshold, where the visible world ends and the deeper order begins. From there, you start to recognize your own life not as a mistake, but as a pattern, a precise one, severe at times, but never random. You are not made to disappear into the ordinary. You are made to remember yourself in the presence of what is real. And perhaps that is the final surprise in Thoth's explanation. Your strength was never born from isolation itself. It was born from what isolation protected inside you. The clear mind, the listening soul, the incorruptible witness, the part of you that kept the record even when everyone else urged you to forget, the part that would not laugh when the room was lying, the part that chose the ache of truth over the comfort of performance, the part that stood in the moonlit chamber of the self and waited through all the silence until your real name could be heard again. So rest there for a moment, not in despair, not in pride, in recognition. You were not rejected because you were empty. You were separated because something in you could not belong to what was false. You were not too much for life. You were too awake for imitation. You were not carrying a flaw. You were carrying a design. And now, at last, you can stop asking the sleeping world to explain the shape of your soul. The night can soften now. The old pressure can loosen. You do not have to solve every mystery before you rest. You do not have to defend your depth to be allowed to keep it. You do not have to prove that your silence meant something. It already did. It carried you. It guarded what was still forming. It gave your spirit a place to breathe when the outer world felt too crowded with noise and role-playing and borrowed voices. That quiet place within you is still there. You can return to it gently. You can let the memories settle without fighting them. The strange childhood distance. The rooms where you felt alone among people. The moments when your body knew before your mind. The losses that seemed cruel at first, then slowly revealed their hidden mercy. None of it needs to be forced into meaning tonight. It is enough to feel that a thread runs through all of it. A wise thread, a steady one, something ancient and patient that never fully left your side. Let yourself feel how much strength it took to remain yourself, even when you did not yet know who that self was. Let yourself feel how much courage it took to walk through misunderstanding without turning completely false. Let yourself feel the relief of no longer needing to call your sensitivity a weakness. It was a lantern. It was a scale. It was a quiet form of guidance. And you're allowed to be at peace with that. The stars do not rush to explain their light. The moon does not apologize for arriving in silence. The temple door does not open for the careless crowd. Some things remain sacred by remaining true to their nature. So can you. Breathe a little deeper. Loosen what can be loosened. Keep only what feels clean and real. The rest can fall away in its own time. You do not need to chase what is meant for you, and you do not need to grieve forever what was never aligned with your spirit. What belongs to your path will meet you without asking you to betray yourself. Stay close to the quiet center. Stay close to the inner witness. Stay close to the truth that makes you whole. That is enough for this night.